Commander Isabella Winter stood at the observation window of Research Station Polaris, watching Aurora Borealis dance across the Arctic night sky. At minus 60 degrees Celsius, even the reinforced glass frosted over, but after 15 years at the station, the cold felt like an old friend. The same couldn't be said for the object currently descending through Earth's atmosphere, trailing blue fire against the stars. Commander, radar confirmation. Lieutenant Raj Patel's voice crackled through her earpiece. Unknown object maintaining controlled descent. Trajectory indicates impact approximately 20 kilometers north of our position. Isabella's breath fogged the glass as she tracked the object's descent. Status of the emergency response team. Suited up and ready in the garage. Whatever this is, it's bigger than any meteor we've tracked. And moving too deliberately, Isabella muttered. After decades of searching the stars, first contact wasn't supposed to happen at an Arctic research station. Yet here they were, watching something very much not human dropping out of the sky. The impact sent tremors through the station's foundations. Isabella was already moving, her thermal suit sealed and ready. Within minutes, she was aboard one of the station's heavy-duty snow crawlers, leading a team of 5 toward the impact site. The crawler's powerful lights cut through the perpetual winter darkness, illuminating endless fields of ice and snow. They found the craft half buried in the ice, its silvery hull gleaming under their lights. Steam rose where its still-hot surface met the frozen ground, creating an otherworldly fog. The vessel was roughly cylindrical, perhaps 30 meters long, with no visible windows or doors. Atmospheric readings normal, Dr. Kira Yoshida reported from her instruments. No radiation or toxic emissions detected. Isabella nodded, her mind racing through first contact protocols they'd never truly expected to use. Maintain distance and establish a perimeter. Alert Global Command that we have a confirmed. A section of the hull suddenly shifted, panels sliding apart with a hydraulic hiss. The team instinctively backed away, weapons raised despite international agreements about peaceful first contact. From the opening emerged a tall, willowy figure that seemed to shimmer in the Arctic air. The alien, there was no other word for it, stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body covered in what appeared to be crystalline scales that caught and reflected their lights. Its forearms moved with fluid grace as it surveyed the humans, and its large, faceted eyes seemed to glow from within. By the eternal stars, it spoke, its voice somehow carrying through the bitter wind. How are you surviving in these conditions? Isabella blinked, surprised both by the perfect English and the question. This is our research station. We live here. The alien's scales shifted color, from silver to a deep blue. Impossible. Our scans indicated temperatures far below survivable ranges for carbon-based life. Yet you stand before me with minimal protection. Minimal. Isabella glanced down at her thermal suit, rated for the harshest Arctic conditions. This is state-of-the-art cold weather gear. Fascinating. The alien moved closer, its movements careful on the ice. I am Zixtal, scientific emissary of the crystalline Concordat. Our ship suffered a drive malfunction, forcing emergency landing. We chose this region precisely because we believed it too hostile for indigenous life. More aliens emerged from the ship, each unique in their crystalline coloration, but sharing the same basic form. They moved with visible discomfort, their scales contracting against the cold. Commander Isabella Winter, International Arctic Research Station Polaris, Isabella replied, lowering her weapon and gesturing for her team to do the same. Welcome to Earth. Though I should warn you, this is actually one of our planet's colder regions. The aliens' collective reaction, a rippling wave of color changes, and what might have been their equivalent of gasps, would have been comical if the situation weren't so profound. Zixtal's scales shifted to a deep purple. You mean to say your species routinely inhabits environments even less severe than this? Our preliminary scans suggested your world experiences temperature variations that should be lethal to most forms of advanced life. We adapt, Isabella said simply. Humanity has learned to thrive everywhere from the poles to the equator. Would you like to come inside? We can offer better shelter while we contact our governments. The alien emissary studied her for a long moment, its crystalline form catching the aurora's light. Perhaps, it said finally, there is much more to learn about your species than our initial scans suggested. As Isabella led the way back to the station, she couldn't help but smile at the aliens' obvious amazement at their every breath in the cold air. Sometimes, she reflected, it took an outsider's perspective to appreciate just how remarkable humanity's adaptations really were. The first steps toward understanding between their species would be taken not in the halls of power or great cities, but here in Earth's frozen reaches, where human endurance had already achieved what alien science deemed impossible. The days following first contact brought unprecedented activity to Station Polaris. The crystalline Concordats vessel, which they called the Star Weaver, had suffered damage to its thermal regulation systems during descent. This left its crew increasingly dependent on human hospitality, a situation that clearly made them uncomfortable. Your species continues to confound our understanding, Zixtal remarked, watching Isabella pour hot coffee in the station's common room. Steam rose from the mug, disappearing into the carefully regulated air. You deliberately consume heated substances for pleasure. Coffee's more necessity than pleasure some days, Isabella replied, sliding a second mug toward Dr. Yoshida as she entered. Though I suppose that depends who you ask. The alien emissary's scales flickered with what they'd learned was amusement. Over the past week, the humans had begun recognizing patterns in the crystalline's color shifting. Deep blues for contemplation, purples for surprise, rapid shimmer patterns for excitement or stress. Our engineers report your assistance has been invaluable, Zixtal said, though they remain puzzled by your technicians' ability to work in external conditions without environmental suits. Kira smiled over her coffee. The maintenance team's thermal gear is pretty basic compared to what your people need. But then, we're not crystalline-based life forms. Different evolutionary paths, different tolerances. Indeed. Zixtal's scales shifted to that deep blue of contemplation. Our scientists are particularly intrigued by your species' temperature regulation mechanisms. The ability to maintain homeostasis across such extreme variations, it's unprecedented in our database of spacefaring civilizations. The station's alert system interrupted their conversation, warning lights pulsing amber. Isabella was on her feet instantly, coffee forgotten. Control room report. Storm front approaching from the northwest, Commander. Rage's voice came through. Category 5 polar storm. Arrival in approximately 6 hours. The Starweaver's repair crew needs to come in immediately. Isabella turned to Zixtal, whose scales had taken on the rapid shimmer of stress. Your people can shelter here, but we need to secure your ship. That storm could damage exposed systems. Impossible. The aliens' color shifted to a dark gray they hadn't seen before. Our remaining crew must maintain the thermal stasis fields or risk crystalline degradation. Without the ship's systems. Then we'll help, Isabella stated firmly. Our engineers can work in rotation through the storm. We've done it before. You would risk your people in such conditions for us. That's what we do, Isabella replied simply. Humanity didn't survive this long by abandoning others to the cold. The next hours were a blur of preparation. The station's maintenance teams worked alongside crystalline engineers, reinforcing the Starweaver's damaged sections against the coming storm. Temperature readings dropped steadily as the storm approached, forcing the aliens to retreat inside their vessel's protected core. Isabella stood on the ship's outer deck, supervising the final storm preparations when she noticed something odd. The vessel's thermal readings were fluctuating in a pattern that didn't match any natural cooling process. Kira, she called over the comm, are you seeing this? These temperature variations. Already analyzing, the scientist replied. Commander, these patterns. They're not random. It's like something's deliberately. A massive power surge ripped through the ship's systems. Emergency alarms blared as the thermal stasis fields began to collapse. Through the thickening storm, Isabella could see the crystalline crew's life signs flickering in distress. This wasn't an accident, she realized, the truth crystallizing as surely as the air around her. Someone sabotaged their systems. The crash, the damage, none of it was accidental. As the storm closed in and temperatures plunged to lethal levels, Isabella faced a choice that would define humanity's first interstellar relationship. The question wasn't whether to help, that was never in doubt, but whether they could save their new allies before whoever wanted this first contact to fail succeeded in their mission. She kept her calm, voice steady despite the howling wind. All teams, emergency protocols. We've got people to save, and we're running out of time. The storm raged beyond Station Polaris's reinforced walls, but the real crisis unfolded in the station's command center. Isabella and her team worked frantically to analyze the sabotage pattern while monitoring the crystalline's deteriorating condition. Thermal cascade failure in 3 hours, Raj reported, his fingers flying over multiple screens. The Starweaver's core temperature is rising. If it continues, their entire crew will experience catastrophic crystalline breakdown. Zixtal's form had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality that Isabella recognized as severe stress. This attack bears the signature of the Obsidian sect. They've opposed contact with developing species for millennia, believing it corrupts the purity of crystalline evolution. Religious extremists, Isabella translated grimly, and they crashed your ship here, assuming Earth's climate would finish their work for them. They underestimated both your species' resilience and your willingness to aid strangers. Zixtal's voice carried an unfamiliar harmonic, but they succeeded in their primary goal. Without the proper restoration sequence, the thermal stasis field cannot be re-established. Dr. Yoshida burst into the command center, her tablet displaying complex thermal imaging patterns. Commander, I've identified the sabotage mechanism. They didn't just damage the thermal regulators, they inverted them. The system is actually generating heat instead of removing it. Can we reverse it? Not without the original crystalline encoding sequences. It's like trying to crack a quantum key. Wait, Isabella turned to Zixtal. Your people adapt to temperature changes through crystalline restructuring, correct? What if we could use that same principle on a larger scale? The alien scales flickered rapidly. Theoretically possible, but it would require precise control over environmental temperatures across the entire ship. In these conditions, we've been managing extreme temperature differentials in this station for decades, Isabella interrupted. Rage, can you link our environmental systems to the Starweaver's remaining functional controls? Understanding dawned across her team's faces. By creating carefully controlled temperature gradients, they might be able to trigger the ship's crystalline structure to naturally reset itself, bypassing the sabotage controls entirely. The next hours were a desperate race against time. While half the station's crew worked to establish the complex network of temperature controls, others evacuated the most affected crystallines to specially prepared chambers within Polaris. Isabella coordinated from the command center, watching as the linked systems slowly began to take effect. "It's working," Kira reported, excitement breaking through her professional demeanor. "The ship's outer hull is beginning to recrystallize in its original configuration. The sabotaged systems are being naturally overridden by the structure's own adaptive properties." But their success had not gone unnoticed. Deep within the station's communications array, a hidden transmitter activated. Somewhere in the storm, other crystalline ships were waiting, vessels crewed by those who would do anything to prevent this alliance from forming. Isabella caught Zixtal's eye across the command center. The Idian scales had taken on a new color, a deep, resolute gold. They both knew this was only the beginning. The Obsidian sect wouldn't stop with one failed attempt, and Earth's winter had just become a battlefield in a conflict spanning stars. "Your species continues to surprise us," Zixtal said quietly. "Few would risk so much for those they barely know." "Maybe that's exactly why the sect fears contact with us," Isabella replied. "They've forgotten what it means to reach across differences and find common ground, even if that ground happens to be covered in ice." As if in answer, the storm intensified, battering against the station's walls. But inside, humans and crystallines worked together, turning Earth's deadly cold into a tool for survival. They had passed the first test, but greater challenges lay ahead. Challenges that would require all of humanity's legendary adaptability to overcome. The approach of the Obsidian Sect's vessels became visible as dark shadows against the aurora-lit sky. Station Polaris's sensors detected 3 crystalline ships, their designs more angular and aggressive than the Star Waver's elegant curves. "They're positioning themselves in a triangular formation," Rage observed. "Energy readings suggest weapons charging." Isabella studied the tactical display, mind racing through options. "Zixtal, what are we dealing with?" Thermal lance arrays. The emissary's scales had darkened to near black. "They'll attempt to superheat the atmosphere around us, creating a devastating thermal shock wave." In this environment, Kira interjected, "The temperature differential would create a megastorm," Isabella finished. "They're not just trying to destroy us. They want to trigger a polar vortex that would freeze everything for hundreds of kilometers." The station shuddered as the first attack came. Beams of intense energy sliced through the storm clouds, turning snow to steam instantly. But the extreme temperature difference had unintended effects. The storm system began to rotate faster, drawing in colder air from the surrounding area. "They don't understand Earth weather systems," Kira shouted over the growing chaos. "The heat they're generating is making the cold air more violent, not less." Isabella watched as massive ice crystals began forming in the supercharged air. "Can we use that? Turn their own attack against them?" Zixtal's scales suddenly flashed with inspiration. Their ship's crystalline structure. In these conditions, a rapid enough temperature change could shatter them, Isabella nodded. "Reg, get me control of the station's thermal arrays. Kira, I need precise temperature readings of the forming storm system." They worked rapidly, using the station's environmental systems to guide and shape the growing megastorm. The Obsidian Sect ships, designed for the stable temperatures of space, began to show signs of stress. Their crystalline hulls contracted and expanded chaotically in the violent temperature fluctuations. Enemy vessels showing structural degradation, Raj reported. "Their weapons are destabilizing." The lead ship fired again, but this time the thermal lance scattered in the turbulent air, its energy dispersing harmlessly. Massive ice crystals, formed by the unnatural temperature gradients, battered against their hulls. Their breaking formation, Kira called out. 2 ships attempting emergency atmospheric exit. The third ship, perhaps more dedicated to their cause, pressed the attack. But the combination of Earth's natural defenses and human ingenuity proved too much. Its crystalline structure, unable to adapt quickly enough to the extreme conditions, began to fracture. Isabella watched through the command center's viewport as the enemy vessel broke apart, its fragments scattered by the very storm it had helped create. The other ships vanished into the upper atmosphere, fleeing back to space. As the storm began to naturally dissipate, Zixtal approached Isabella. "Your people's understanding of extreme environments, it saved not only my crew, but perhaps the future of our species' relations. The Obsidian sect believed your world's harsh conditions would prove your primitiveness. Instead, it has demonstrated your greatest strength." "We've had to learn to work with nature, not against it," Isabella replied. "Sometimes the best way to survive isn't to fight the cold, but to understand it. Make it work for you instead of against you." Through the clearing sky, new lights appeared, ships of the crystalline Concordat, arriving in response to Zixtal's distress call. But they found not a disaster to manage, but a triumph to witness. Proof that humanity's place among the stars would be earned not through advanced technology alone, but through their unique ability to adapt, survive, and help others do the same. Spring's first light touched the horizon at Station Polaris, ending the long Arctic night. In the months since the battle, the station had become a symbol of unprecedented cooperation between humans and the crystalline Concordat. The Star Weaver, fully restored, gleamed in the dawn light. But unlike before, its crystalline structure now incorporated elements of human engineering, thermal regulation systems that worked with Earth's extreme conditions rather than against them. The modifications exceed all expectations. Zixtal announced in the station's newly constructed diplomatic chamber. Representatives from Earth's governments and the Concordat gathered around a table designed to accommodate both species. "Our scientists believe this hybrid technology could revolutionize deep space exploration." Isabella, recently promoted to Director of Human Crystalline Relations, studied the technical readouts. "The principles we developed here are already being adapted for other extreme environments. Several nations have proposed joint research stations on Venus and Mercury. The Obsidian sect's failure has led to an unexpected transformation within our own society." Zixtal's scales rippled with optimistic gold tones. "Many who once feared contact with primitive species now see the value of diversity in approach and adaptation." The station's medical bay had become a center for cross-species research. Dr. Yoshida worked alongside crystalline scientists, studying how both species handled extreme conditions. Their findings suggested possibilities that neither civilization had imagined alone. "We've confirmed that human cellular adaptability can be mirrored in crystalline structures," Kira explained to the assembled delegates. While the Concordat focused on controlling their environment, humans evolved to survive within it. "By combining these approaches, we've created systems more resilient than either of us could achieve independently." The diplomatic implications reached far beyond technology. Earth's admission to the galactic community had been fast-tracked, with the crystalline Concordat as their primary sponsors. The very qualities the Obsidian sect had feared, humanity's adaptability, their willingness to embrace harsh conditions, their drive to help others survive, had proven to be their greatest diplomatic assets. "The universe is not always welcoming," Isabella addressed the chamber. Space is cold, hostile, and unforgiving. But humanity has never let that stop us. We've learned to find warmth in the coldest places, to build communities in the harshest conditions, and to reach out to others even when it means risking ourselves. She gestured to the viewport, where the aurora still danced across the sky. This station was built to study Earth's extreme environments. Now it's become a bridge between stars. Perhaps that's fitting. After all, what better place to forge connections than here, where we've already mastered the art of thriving in conditions others thought impossible? As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the ice, humans and crystallines continued their work. The station had grown, new structures incorporating both species' architectural styles rising from the permafrost. What had begun as an emergency landing had become a symbol of possibility, proof that the cold depths of space need not enforce isolation. The Obsidian sect believed Earth's harsh climate would prove our incompatibility. Zixtal remarked privately to Isabella after the ceremony. Instead, it proved that the greatest advances come not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them together. Isabella watched as human and crystalline crews prepared for another day of joint operations. The spring light caught their crystalline allies' faceted forms, scattering rainbow patterns across the snow. In the end, it wasn't advanced technology or military might that had earned humanity its place among the stars. It was their fundamental nature, shaped by millennia of adapting to Earth's most extreme conditions, that had proven their readiness for the challenges ahead. The long winter was over, but its lessons would guide both species as they ventured together into the cosmic frontier.